The quiet strength of starting over. How to rebuild when life doesn't look the way you thought it would. You know, I think there's something no one really tells you about starting over. They talk about new beginnings like they're shiny and exciting. Fresh starts, clean slates, the next chapter. But the truth is, sometimes it doesn't feel like a beginning at all. It feels like an ending you didn't ask for. It feels like standing in a quiet room surrounded by the pieces of what used to be your life, wondering how on earth to begin again. And yet, somehow, we do. Not because we have all the answers, but because something inside us, something small and steady, refuses to give up. So I want to talk about that quiet strength, the kind that doesn't shout or sparkle, but whispers. You can keep going, even from here. So make yourself a cup of tea, find a soft space to land, and let's talk about what it really means to start over. Welcome, come on in, get comfy and let's sit a while. There are moments in life when everything that used to make sense doesn't anymore. The plans, the routines, the titles, even the small daily habits that once gave shape to your days. They all seem to fall away and you're left staring at a blank space where your old life used to be. It's disorienting, like walking into a room after someone's moved all the furniture. You keep reaching for what's no longer there. Sometimes starting over arrives quietly. A job ends. The children move out. Retirement begins. Sometimes it was something you'd been planning for a long time and really looking forward to, and now the big new adventure begins. Other times it crashes into your life like a storm. Loss, illness, heartbreak, or one of those curveballs that tears up your carefully written script. Either way, there's always that moment when you stop and realise nothing looks the same anymore. I think that's one of the hardest moments we ever face, that in-between time. Not the crisis itself, but the silence that follows it. The world keeps moving, people keep talking, and you're standing there thinking, what now? What am I in this new landscape? Nobody prepares you for that bit. The manuals and motivational quotes make it sound like starting over is full of empowerment and new beginnings. And sometimes it is, eventually. But first, it's messy. It's lonely. It's a little like being dropped into a foreign country without a map. Because the truth is, when life changes suddenly, you don't just lose circumstances, you lose a version of yourself, the person who used to know what came next, the one who had plans and routines and confidence in the shape of things. And that version of you doesn't disappear quietly, it lingers. You catch yourself reaching for old patterns, making mental lists that don't apply anymore, glancing at the calendar out of habit. You look at people who still have what you've lost and feel that ache, not out of envy, but recognition. You used to be in that season once. And in those early days of change, everyone wants to help. They tell you you're strong. They remind you that everything happens for a reason. They say you'll find your feet again soon. And maybe you will, but not right away. Because before rebuilding comes the stillness, the blank space, the long, quiet hours where you sit with yourself and realise that the life you knew has ended and a new one hasn't yet begun. It's tempting to rush through that part, to fill it with projects or distractions or anything that feels like progress. But in truth, that quiet gap is sacred. It's where the ground settles. It's where you start to hear the faint whispers of who you're becoming next. I've been through a few of those chapters myself, the kind where you wake up one day and your old sense of certainty has gone. And I'll tell you, it's not courage that gets you through. It's something quieter than that. It's the small, stubborn decision to keep going, even when you don't know where going leads. Sometimes starting over doesn't begin with a grand plan. Sometimes it begins with a cup of tea, a deep breath, and the faint hope that tomorrow might feel just a little less heavy. That's the thing about endings. They always look final, but hidden inside them is a beginning that hasn't yet found its shape. You can't see it at first, but it is there, waiting in the silence, quietly unfolding beneath the surface. And one day you'll look back and realise that stillness wasn't the end after all. It was the soil. There comes a point after the shock and stillness when you start to notice small things again. The way the light hits the kitchen counter in the morning, the sound of the kettle boiling, a bird outside the window singing like the world hasn't ended, because, of course, it hasn't. It's strange, that quiet return of awareness. You don't plan it, and it doesn't happen all at once. But somewhere between one breath and the next, you realise you've started to live again, just in the tiniest ways. Starting over can be slow work. It's not dramatic, not like in the movies where someone burns their past and reinvents themselves overnight. No, it's quieter than that, gentler, and much more human. It's making a cup of tea for one and letting that be enough. It's tidying a drawer because it makes one corner of your world feel in order again. It's choosing to go for a walk even though you don't feel like it, simply because the air might help you remember what it feels like to be alive. You begin to understand that healing doesn't happen in grand gestures. It happens in repetition, in the ordinary, everyday acts that stitch your world back together, thread by thread. And the truth is, it's not always a straight line. Some days you'll feel strong and hopeful, ready to take on the new chapter. Other days you'll wake up and want nothing more than to crawl back into the familiar safety of what used to be. That's all right. Rebuilding isn't a race, it's a rhythm. Some days you plant, some days you rest, some days you simply survive. There's this quiet kind of strength that begins to grow inside you during that time. Not the bold, fearless kind that shouts, "I've got this," but the quieter kind that whispers, "I'm still here." And that kind of strength, I've learned, is the most enduring of all. You start to see beauty in small victories, making a new friend, finding laughter again, even if it's short and unexpected, cooking yourself a proper meal for the first time in weeks, trusting, little by little, that maybe the ground beneath your feet is holding steady again. At first it feels like you're patching up a life, mending holes, rearranging the furniture, trying to rebuild what was lost. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, something shifts. You realise you're not rebuilding the old life, you're building a new one. And it doesn't have to look the same to be good. That's the quiet revolution of starting over. You stop chasing the person you were and start becoming the person you're meant to be now. It's not about forgetting what was, or pretending you're fine when you're not. It's about carrying the wisdom of what you've lived through into what comes next. You find yourself letting go of old expectations, not because you gave up, but because you've outgrown them. And somewhere deep inside, you begin to trust that even though the map is unfamiliar, you can still find your way. You learn that courage doesn't always look like action. Sometimes it looks like rest, like sitting quietly in the unknown and letting time do its quiet, invisible work. Because one morning you'll wake up and without realising it, the air will feel lighter. You'll make your morning tea, hum a little tune, and realise that something inside you, something you thought was gone, has begun to come back to life. Not all at once, but enough to keep going. There's a point in every new beginning where you realise you're no longer surviving, you're simply living again. It doesn't come with fireworks or fanfare. You just catch yourself smiling for no particular reason. You notice that your shoulders aren't quite so heavy anymore. You make plans, not because you need to, but because you want to. And somewhere in the quiet of an ordinary day, you realise you've become someone new. The truth is, change reshapes you, not into a lesser version of yourself, but into a deeper one. There's a stillness that comes from having walked through the storm and discovered you didn't break. You bent, you trembled, you grieved, but you're still here, and somehow you've grown kinder, softer, wiser. That's the quiet strength of starting over. It doesn't roar, it doesn't demand attention, it simply hums beneath the surface. A steady pulse that says, you can trust yourself now. You've walked through worse and kept walking. When you've lost things you thought you couldn't live without, a role, a person, a season of life, something extraordinary happens. You learn to build from within. You stop waiting for permission or perfect timing. You realise that no one else has the answers for your life, and that's oddly freeing. It's not that you stop caring about what happened before, it's that you stop needing it to define you. You can look back with love and gratitude, even sadness, but you no longer live there. You've stepped into a new landscape, one you're shaping as you go. And the beauty of it is, this new version of you, the one that came from the ashes, is more real than ever. You know what matters now? You've learnt that peace is not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of acceptance. You've learned that joy can live alongside loss. That hope doesn't mean pretending, it means trusting that even in uncertainty, life will find a way to bloom again. I think there's something profoundly beautiful about people who have had to start over. They carry a quiet wisdom in their eyes. They understand that strength doesn't mean holding it all together. It means learning when to let go, when to rest, and when to begin again. And if you're in that place right now, still gathering the pieces, still wondering what comes next, please know this: you don't have to rebuild your life overnight. You don't even have to know what it will look like yet. You just have to keep showing up, gently, patiently, faithfully. Because one day, without fanfare, you'll realise you've built something solid beneath your feet. It may not be the life you planned, but it's the life you've grown. Through every tear, every quiet morning, every small act of courage. and it will be yours. Not perfect, not predictable, but real. And that, my friend, is the quiet strength of starting over. You know, if there's one thing I've learnt about beginning again, it's that life rarely goes back to what it was before. And maybe that's not the tragedy we think it is. Maybe it's the invitation. Because every time we start over, we carry a little more wisdom, a little more tenderness, a little more trust in the fact that we can survive what we thought we couldn't. So if you're in that in-between season, still finding your way through the quiet, please remember, you're not behind, you're not broken, you're growing, even now, even here. And in time, what feels like the ending will become the story of how you found your strength. Thank you for sharing your time with me. Take gentle care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.